Somewhere right now, while you're sitting there, a person is climbing a narrow stair with a key in their hand. Because if they don't, a machine that has been counting time without a break for 300 years will quietly fall silent for the first time in living memory. So let me show you what I mean. I found 16 of these old clocks that only still run because somebody keeps showing up. And the more I looked, the less it was about the clocks. Number 16. The astronomical clock in the Old Town Square in Prague. It's been on that wall since 1410, which makes it the oldest astronomical clock still running anywhere. It's been rebuilt, burned, shelled in the last days of the war in 1945, and put back together more than once. But the mechanism still has to be wound by hand, by a keeper who climbs up inside the tower and turns it, because nobody ever built it to wind itself. The clock has to be wound roughly once a week, and there's a calendar wheel inside it painted by a Czech artist named Josef Manes in the 1860s. The original's in a museum now because they didn't want to risk it turning anymore. There's a legend that the man who perfected it, a fellow they call Hanush, was blinded on the city's orders so he could never make another. Probably not true. What's true is plainer and stranger. That a thing this old keeps time only 'cause a person keeps climbing. Number 15. The Great Clock at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. For a long stretch, the keeping of accurate time for an entire empire of ships came down to a handful of instruments and the men who tended them. A ship at sea could only find its longitude if it carried the exact time from a known place. Lose the time, lose the position, run aground. Whole crews died over this. In 1707, a British fleet wrecked on the rocks off the Scilly Isles. 2,000 men drowned, partly because nobody on board could say with certainty how far east or west they were. So time wasn't an abstraction there. It was the thing standing between a crew and the rocks. And it ran on winding, on checking, on someone deciding the readings mattered today as much as yesterday. My read is that's the first thing these clocks teach you, that accuracy was never automatic. It was a chore somebody refused to skip. Number 14. The clock that drops a ball, every day at 1 o'clock. On the roof of that same observatory sits a bright red ball on a mast, and since 1833 it has climbed halfway up at 12:55, all the way at 12:58, and dropped at exactly 1. Ships in the Thames set their chronometers by watching it fall. It still drops today. And the thing that gets me is the design. It's a clock you read with your eyes from a distance, made for people who couldn't hear a bell over the wind and the water. They picked 1 o'clock, by the way, not noon, because at noon, the astronomers were busy taking their own readings of the sun and couldn't spare the hand to drop a ball. Somebody had to build time you could see, time you could trust from across a river full of strangers. Number 13. The Zytglogge in Bern, Switzerland. A clock tower that started life as a city gate around 1218, then became a prison, then got the clockwork. The main mechanism dates to 1530, and most of it is original. Actual gears that have been turning for almost 500 years. A keeper still winds it by hand and adjusts it, and the figures that come out and turn before the hour, a parade of bears, a jester, a rooster that crows, have been doing their little circuit since before anyone alive had a great-great-grandparent. Einstein lived a few minutes' walk from that tower when he worked out relativity,
and he'd ride the tram past it. Some say it sat in the back of his head while he was thinking about what time even is. You stand under it, and you're watching motion that hasn't stopped since the Reformation. Nobody who set it going is anything but dust now. The gears didn't get the memo.
Number 12. Big Ben, or properly, the Great Clock of Westminster. The bell is Big Ben, built in 1859. And here's the part people don't know. They keep it on time with a stack of old penny coins balanced on the pendulum. Add a penny, the clock speeds up by about 2/5 of a second a day. Take one off, it slows. The coins are pre-1971 pennies, the big old heavy ones, and the keeper still adds and removes them by hand after checking the clock against the national time signal. So one of the most famous clocks on Earth is regulated by a clockmaker quite literally moving small change around with a steady hand. The most modern thing about it is the people. My read is there's something honest in that we never fully handed time over to the machine. We kept a thumb on the scale. Number 11. The Salisbury Cathedral clock in England. There's an iron-framed clock there that some people argue is the oldest working clock in the world, dating to around 1386. No face, no hands. It was never meant to be read. It was meant to strike, to ring the hours for prayer, for a building full of people whose whole day was shaped by bells. It sat unused and forgotten in a tower for years, taken for scrap iron more than once nearly, then was rediscovered and restored in the 1950s and set going again. Whether it's truly the oldest is disputed. There's no signature, no date stamped in the iron, just historians arguing over the style of the forging. It has no way of telling you what time it is. It only knows how to announce that time has passed. 600 years of marking a thing it can't show you. Number 10. The Strasbourg Astronomical Clock. The current mechanism is from 1843, built by a man named Jean-Baptiste Zytglogge. But there have been clocks on that spot in the cathedral since the 1350s, each one rebuilt when the last wore out or broke. This one tracks the position of the planets, the phases of the moon, leap years, even the slow wobble of the Earth's axis that completes a circle once every 25,800 years or so. Zytglogge built into it a mechanism that computes the date of Easter, correcting itself for the church's calendar rules, and it only fully runs that computation once a year, at midnight on New Year's Eve, in front of nobody. Think about that. Somebody built a gear meant to turn through a cycle no human will ever watch complete. A single rotation longer than all of recorded history. You wind a clock like that, not for yourself. You wind it for a time you'll never reach. Number 9. The clocks at the Wells Cathedral, also late 14th century. The original mechanism is so old it was retired, and now runs in a museum in London, where it has kept going for over 600 years. Above the dial, jousting knights still ride out and knock each other down every 15 minutes. The same one losing every single time, century after century. Same fall, same hour, forever. There's a man figure called Jack Blandiver who kicks bells with his heels on the quarter hour, sitting up in a corner of the wall. Nobody remembers who he was named for. The name itself is a puzzle historians shrug at. The motion outlived the meaning. My guess is that's how most things end. Not stopped, just no longer understood. Number 8. The Gros Horloge in Rouen, France. A great gilded clock spanning a street on an arch, with works dating back to around 1389. For most of its life, the dial had a single hand, just an hour hand, no minutes. And that wasn't a flaw. For the people walking under it, the hour was as fine as time needed to be cut. You didn't have a minute. Nobody was waiting on your minute. The face also shows the phase of the moon and a little sun on a weekly wheel, 'cause those mattered more to a medieval day than the difference between 10 past and quarter past. We added the second hand and the minute hand later, as life sped up and started demanding them. So the clock didn't just keep time, it kept a record of how fine we decided to slice it. The closer you look, the more it's a clock measuring us. Number 7. The Shepherd Gate Clock at Greenwich. The one mounted on the wall outside. The first clock to show Greenwich Mean Time to the public. It has a 24-hour dial, so noon sits at the bottom and midnight at the top, which feels wrong to the eye because we're so used to 12. It's not even a clock in the usual sense. It's a slave dial, driven by signals from a master clock inside, one of the first electric clock systems anywhere. People would set their pocket watches by it on the way past, and for a while, there was a family in London, the Belvilles, who for over 100 years took the exact time off Greenwich and walked it around the city by foot and by carriage, selling it to shops and clockmakers door to door. The last of them, a woman named Ruth Belville, was still doing it into the 1940s. They sold time, literally carried the correct second through the streets like milk. Number 6. The Prague clock again, the ones kept alive through war. In May 1945, in the last days of the fighting, the old town hall was set ablaze, the building burned, and the clock's wooden figures and Marness's calendar dial were lost to the fire. It could have stayed a ruin. It would have been understandable. Instead, people rebuilt the figures from old drawings and photographs, recarved them by hand, repainted the calendar, and got the thing ticking again by 1948, in a city that had every reason to be thinking about other things. Rubble, the missing, what comes next? Somebody decided in the middle of all that the clock mattered. My read is, you only fight that hard to restart a clock when it stopped being about the time a long time ago. It's a promise you make to a place that it's still itself. Number 5. The Astronomical Clock in Olomouc, in what's now the Czech Republic. It's old, 16th century in origin, but here's the strange turn. It was badly damaged near the end of the war, riddled with gunfire. And when it was rebuilt in the 1950s under the new communist government, the new figures weren't saints and kings anymore. They were workers, a chemist, a blacksmith, an athlete, ordinary people rendered in mosaic, in the round. Even the figures that parade at noon were swapped from the apostles to laborers. So the same clock that once turned with the figures of heaven now turns with the figures of the factory floor. A clock is a mirror that runs on gears. Each age that rewinds it carves its own face into it and tells itself that's what was always there. Number 4. The water clocks, clepsydras, that ran in places long before gears. I'm reaching back here, but it matters for the through line. For thousands of years in Egypt, in China, in ancient Greece, time was kept by water, dripping at a steady rate from one vessel to another, and somebody had to refill them, top them up, watch the level, adjust for the cold that slowed the flow and the warmth that quickened it. Athens had clepsydras timing speeches in court. When your water ran out, you stopped talking, whether you were finished or not. There was a clock in 11th century China, built by a man named Su Song, a water-driven tower as tall as a house that tracked the stars and chimed the hours with little figures. And when his dynasty fell and the capital was taken, it was dismantled, carried off north, and nobody could ever get it running again.
The knowledge to wind it died with the people who tended it. A machine is only ever as immortal as its keepers.
Number 3. The keeper themselves. Every one of these clocks has, at its center, not a battery and not a power line, but a job. A human being who holds a key and a schedule. At Big Ben, there's a team of clockmakers who service it. In Prague, a tower keeper who climbs every few days. In Bern, in Strasbourg, in Salisbury, a named person who comes on the day they're meant to come, in the cold, upstairs nobody else uses, and does a small mechanical thing that nobody will notice unless they fail to do it. They learn it as a trade, often from one person who held the post before them, and a lot of them do it for decades and never get a word of it in a paper. It's the most invisible kind of work there is, the kind whose only visible result is that nothing went wrong. My read is that's most of what holds the world up. The people whose success looks exactly like nothing happening. Number 2. What happens the day nobody comes? Because that's the quiet fact under all of these. Every one of them is one missed climb, one forgotten key, one ordinary Tuesday from stopping. The gears don't know they're famous. They don't know it's been 300 years. They'll wind down the same way a cheap kitchen clock does, the same physics, the pendulum losing a sliver of energy to friction on every swing that nobody put back, the arc getting smaller, the tick stretching out, and then nothing. And the silence afterward would sound exactly like the silence in any empty room. No drama. We saw a small version of it during the lockdowns, when a few of these towers went quiet for a while because the keepers couldn't get to them. The most continuous things we've ever built are held up by attendance, and attendance is the easiest thing in the world to break. Number 1. The handoff. Here's the part I keep coming back to. None of these clocks have been wound by the same hands for more than a few decades, because we don't last that long. So a clock that's run for 600 years has been kept alive by a chain of maybe 20, 30 people, each of whom learned it from the one before and taught it to the one after, and most of whom never met across the gap of years. The first keeper and the keeper now share nothing but a key and a job. Nobody alive has wound the Salisbury clock for its whole life. Nobody ever will. The clock is the only thing in the room that remembers all of them. Not as memory, it's just iron, but as wear, as the smooth groove their hands left in it. It outran every single person who ever loved it, and it did it on their hands. So here's where I land. We talk about these clocks like they're survivors, like the machine is the tough one. It isn't. The clock is the fragile part. A few centuries of gears that would stop tonight without us. The thing that actually lasted is the showing up. One person, then the next, deciding the climb was worth making for a tick nobody would thank them for. That's not the clock keeping time. That's people keeping a promise to people they'll never meet. Anyway, that's where I'll set it down tonight. Thanks for staying for the quiet part, the winding, not the chiming. That's the part I actually make these for. If you want to sit with the next strange thing when it shows up, the subscribe button's right there. No pressure. Just a guy. Just thinking. I'll see you in the next one.